Lance Hall here for Let's Discuss with Lance Hall, and I am thrilled today to have the legendary Bill Champlin zooming in with me to talk about his new album, and then we're going to talk about a whole host of other stuff. How you doing this afternoon, Bill?
I'm swinging like crazy, just like from the trees, as it
Eh,
were. I mean, actually, it's pretty nice out today. It's been a little cold in California. Of course, you're probably going, poor baby.
Yeah, yeah, I'm up here in Vermont. There's snow finally, and it's
Yeah,
finally cold, which is what we need. But
yeah, I hear you.
hey, we take what we can get, right?
Absolutely. And weather is weather. The one thing that you can count on is that it's going to change pretty soon.
Right.
It's somewhat, yeah.
Absolutely. You've got an album coming out January 22nd. It's called Living for Love. Now, is the label, is it Imagine?
Imagine it's spelled Imagen.
Right.
So for a while, I was calling Imogen, and then Bob Weingart, is the president of the company, said no, it's we pronounce it Imagine.
Okay.
So they're releasing it. They've been really great. I mean, they turned me on to Shauna, who probably called you and got hooked up this connection, and it just really they got a really good team that's swinging hard, man. I love it.
Absolutely. The minute the email came through from Shauna and I looked at it, I'm like, I replied right back. When can I set up an interview?
Yeah. She's a sweetie pie. I mean, she's on fire. She's got me doing all kinds of stuff, more than I ever have when I was signed to Warner Brothers or Elektra or something. I mean, he's on the case, man. It's pretty happening.
How did you get hooked up with Bob and Imagine for this album?
I met him at actually Jason Sheff was doing his album in Nashville with Jay DeMarcus, and he called me and said, "Hey man, you want to fly into Nashville, do some backgrounds?" I said, "It sounds like a kind of a cool thing." It was before COVID, obviously.
Right.
So I went back there, and Bob was hanging out. I guess he was going to get involved with some of it, and I met him. We went to breakfast, and then he came to a session, and he's really excited about music. I mean, anybody who's a music fan like he is, it's like, hey, I And then when the word kind of got out that I was making an album, he I think IM'd me or something, and said, "Hey, this is Bob. We met at Jason's session. I'd love to talk to you about the record." And we ended up talking a little bit. He wasn't that interested in releasing CDs. He wanted to just do the digital. So I said, I'll do the CDs. You do the digital.
Sure.
And he said, great, we're happening. So my CDs, which by the way, has got a really great cover, and all the different stuff. It's the same songs, same music, but they'll be available at billchamplin.com/shop.
Yeah.
But and we're getting a lot of pre-orders on the album. Somebody mentioned to me the other day, Alice Cooper said, if I buy something, I want to be able to touch it. I don't want to buy air.
Right. I agree. I am still a firm believer in physical product. I want to see the case and everything.
Well, I remember when I started doing digital recording, and you pay somebody $3,000 and you get the chip that's so small you can barely see it.
Yeah.
They put them in. They put it in a little thing, and then they put a bigger package on it, so you feel like you're getting something.
Right. Yeah. There you go. Now, you mentioned the cover. I was going to ask you about that. Vladimir Kush did the cover.
Vladimir Kush. He's an amazingly great painter. We bought a piece of his work probably 10, 15 years ago, and we just Tamara and I happened to be in Las Vegas for something. I can't remember what we were there for, but we just walked by. We were going to a restaurant, and we walked by his gallery in Las Vegas, which had just closed. The guy was still there, the guy that was handling the gallery, because Vladimir Kush actually lives in Maui. He lives in Hawaii, yeah. But nice. Good work if you can get it, Yeah. And so he and Tamara just looked and said, "Here's a new one. I haven't seen that before. My God, what a record cover it would make." So she kind of got into it. We got in touch with her. We actually bought the painting. It wasn't the painting, but it was a really, a great print, and it's just well put together. Yeah. And we just licensed it for the album. It's just so beautiful that we just went, oh, great. I mean, if we ever do an LP, that thing's gonna fly.
Any thoughts to putting this down on vinyl?
There were some thoughts about it. Right now, I'm busy doing what this is about. Let's
Okay.
get this
Yep.
thing going. And Bob's got Imagine Records. They got a really good situation with Warner Music Group as far as distribution is concerned. Not quite sure how you distribute air, but I guess they figured out a way to do it at some level, and
Nice.
almost worldwide except for Japan. And I've got another situation with Sony in Japan.
Nice. Nice. Let's get into the album a little bit. You record the first single, "Reason to Believe," came out January 1st. Great tune. I understand this is kind of special. You got an old friend on bass playing who is no longer with us, but he's with us.
George Hawkins. George
Yeah.
was the bass player. Him and Tris were the bass player and drummer for Kenny Loggins for maybe 10 years. I mean, he was on all those, I'm All Right and Footloose, and George was on all those records.
Wow.
I knew him before that. He was a big Suns fan. He used to like the Suns a lot.
Okay.
And I just kind of known him for years. And, I didn't even know he was a bass player for the first 3 or 4 years I knew him. Then I saw him playing with Loggins and Messina, and I went, holy God, this guy can play. And he's been on at some level on most of my records for God, is a long time, good long time. Yeah. I just love I loved his playing. His singing was great. His writing was great. He was just really one of the funniest human beings on the earth. I just had a ball. And when Bruce Geitch, who's the guitar player and co-writer on Reason to Believe, when he sent me the track, I went, oh my God, who's on this? He said it was Vinny Colaiuta on drums and George Hawkins on bass. And I went, oh, my heart just skipped a beat. I went, oh, we can get a George tune on the record. Yeah. I just really love the guy. It's just, I miss him. I miss him terribly. But it's great. We got one of his tracks on it, and the tracks smoke on him. And the minute Tamara and I heard it, we went pencil, paper, let's go. So we wrote the melodies and lyrics in the next hour from getting you got an MP3 in the mail and it was just like, oh, well, we're on this one, Next thing you know, I called Bruce. I said, dude, send me the files. we're going to sing this and knock it off. And I took it over I keep my Hammond organ at Carmen Grillo's house. He's got a great studio over there. So I went over and threw B3 on it and mixed it and mastered it. And there you have it.
Magic. That's great.
It's just one of those things that came out of nowhere. And a lot of stuff happened like that on this album. I got 3 songs from that Greg Matheson and I wrote together. And, we've written a lot over the years and have all been really good material and grooving like a dog. Greg's tracks are always in the pocket, just great stuff.
Well, talking about one that's grooving, track 2, especially me, I love the horns. That had like a real funky vibe to it. I like the backing vocals.
Yeah.
That tune grooves.
That's all Greg. Greg put that groove together. And Mark Russo, who's the sax player with the Doobie Brothers, put the horns on. I mean, I was looking to get a horn section on it, and, everybody was locked down so much. I just sent the tracks to, and Greg wrote a little chart, sent the track to Mark up at his house, and he's got a studio in his house, or at least a workstation. And Mark put on 1 baritone, 2 tenors, and 2 altos, and stacked up the horn parts on it. And you see what I mean about groove?
Yeah.
And that's Matheson. I mean, his groove on there was him on Fender bass. He didn't play. I think he played keyboard bass on it, and he also played organ on it.
Nice.
Yeah, Matheson's he co-produced. Remember when Sheena Easton had the song "Strut"?
Yeah.
Greg produced that
wow.
song. Yeah, he's a monster, and he's a real dear friend of mine. I got him on 3 songs on the record.
Nice. Track 4, "Show Me." To me, as I was listening to that track, I got kind of like a Steely Dan kind of vibe on that one.
A little bit, yeah. I like the duo. I think Chicago. Yeah, you're right on the money. The Chicago fans will like it because it was me and Jason singing it. We did a duet. So Jason Sheff is singing the high parts, and I'm singing the low parts, and I put an organ solo on the thing. I mean, the tune was just something Jason and I wrote together. That we had it for another project or something, and I called him. I said, "Can I use this on the solo album?" He said, "Absolutely, go for it." Yeah. So I brought him back over, and we did we added a few extra little vocal things on it. And it turned out to be a pretty cool song. I dug the way it ended up coming out.
Yeah, great tune. Track 7, "Alone." My note on here, I'm a guitar solo guy, and the guitar solo on Alone blew me away. Love
Really?
that one. Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, I played it. I mean, it was me, and I was just trying to keep it simple and straight ahead.
Yeah.
And I think I might have doubled it. It's
Yeah.
possible that I doubled it, but you know, there's some other guitar solos on the album. There's one on the song right before Alone, is a song called Hey,
Yeah.
and Tal Morris played the solo on it. I actually drove up to Marin County and had him play it in his studio.
Mm,
This was when, you know, this was all before COVID, when
right.
you know, really
When you
started.
could do those things.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to do it for something else, and then I realized, hey, this whole song is smoking. A lot of people really like that one. So,
Mm,
and Alone was, you know, it was just pretty much me doing everything on that one.
mm. Great
Yeah.
track. I like that. And I love that solo.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Love Lives On. You mentioned a Hammond. Did you put the Hammond on that? I thought it was a nice touch. That track was my favorite song. I think it's a
Yeah.
hit, Bill.
You know, I've always thought that was a real pop kind of hit. I played all the guitars and did the B3 and piano on that one.
Mm,
And a lot of the bass on it sounds like Fender bass or Moog bass. You know, yeah, it's pretty obvious when you're hearing Moog bass, but a
mm.
lot of the bass on it is actually a keyboard bass. It's
Yeah.
I guess a sample of a real bass. So I played a lot of bass on the record, and on Alone also, and a handful of other tunes, and like that. So, you know, I had a ball doing some of this stuff. It was like, hey, this is smoking, you know. And I was
Yeah.
doing a lot of the work against just an electric drum track. You know,
Okay.
a drum track that I put together, just enough to so the drummers, and I always just replace them with real drummers, because there's just nothing like a guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And Alan Hertz
Dang.
played. Alan Hertz is the drummer. He plays with the Sons of Champlin when we play.
Okay.
He's played with Scott Henderson. He's played with Mike Landau. He's played with a lot of different people. But not only is a great drummer, he mixed the record.
Mm,
He's
okay.
he's a fine Pro Tools engineer, just really, really cool.
Mm.
And the drums were kind of split between. Well, Vinny did the one song that Bruce sent, the Reason to Believe, but the rest of the record is either Alan Hertz or Gordon Campbell.
Nice.
On drums.
Losing Ground, track 9. What was your mood when you wrote that song, Bill? I mean, tell us how you really feel. You know?
Well, we got Abe Laboriel to play bass on it. I mean,
Yeah.
and Abe's and everybody's kind of locked in their homes at this point in the game, so it's kind of hard to get a lot of stuff going on. By the way, almost the whole record, Lenny Castro is playing in percussion.
Okay.
And that guy's got a pocket that won't quit. He sees where you're putting it and goes right down to the middle of it. He's just really a great musician.
Yeah.
And really cool guy. A really great guy. He's played with Toto over the years.
Wow.
And I think he actually did one tour with Joe Bonamassa. It was just Joe and Lenny. That's it.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
I saw it on TV, and there was just the two of them at. I think it was a little club in Vienna called the Vienna Opera House. It was like nice little upholstered sewer, you know what I mean?
Wow.
Cool little club. And Lenny was, you know, the thing is, whenever I call these people to be on the record, nobody went, well, let me check my schedule or anything. They went, Bill, I'm in, count me in. They usually know that the music's going to be going somewhere and doing something.
Right. Yeah. What was your point of reference for the lyrics on Losing Ground? I mean those.
Well, I don't know. I think it was pre-election.
Yeah. You sound a little ticked.
Well, not really. I was just going, you know, I mean, how many times have we been lied to by politicians?
Yeah.
Or let's put it this way, just to get a smaller number, how many times have we not been lied to by politicians? You know, it's just the nature of it. Let me kiss your baby. Now let me raise your taxes. You know, It just goes on and on and on. And I was in one of those days where I was turning off the news going, oh, I can't handle it anymore. I'm done.
I'm going to write a song.
Yeah. And I asked Greg, I said, put me together something it's a little bit gospel-y, you know, one of those, you know, with, you know, kind of gospel organ and piano. And he tore it up. He's actually playing organ on that one. And Greg Matheson's, I mean, I can't say enough about him. He's ridiculous. Just one of the all-time greats.
Track 13, The Truth Has Begun. I could see that being like a fabulous song that goes into like a 15-minute live jam when you're doing this live, particularly when you get like towards the last 3 or 4 minutes of that track.
That's where Mark Russo just ate the tag on that song for lunch. I mean, Russo on the alto sax.
Yeah.
ridiculous player. You know, we had him do it on, especially me, we had him do that. And then I just said, I'm going to send you another one, just play a solo. And then when I he said, sent the solo back to me, you know, just a MP3, because he lives in Walnut Creek, California. He lives way the hell up the street, as it were. And I just listened to it. I said, I'm going to pull the background vocals on the, you know, we're going to do it when we get to the end, what we call the tag or the fade, you know.
Yeah.
And I said, just take it. It belongs to you. And that's where the plot sickens. That's where Mark just wails, and he's really a major player. I mean, I was so glad that he agreed to do this. I mean, he's just forget it. He's one of the best ever.
A great track. Yeah, great jam, great track.
Thank you.
Last track, at least on the American release, you got 14 on the one for the US. You got 16 in Japan, right?
Yeah.
So last track on the American releases, which I got, My Time. What a powerful message.
It's pretty deep, you know. I mean,
yeah.
I had gone through so many really life-threatening illnesses over the last 5 years that was kind of, I said, I need to write how I felt while this was going on. I mean, I had a couple, that's one of the songs that's really kind of a, hey, after you're dead, it's hard to thank anybody. You know? So that's kind of that's sort of where the song came from. And then, because I had a week where I was diagnosed with very aggressive prostate cancer on Monday. And the next day, Tuesday, my older son, Brad, passed away from esophageal cancer.
Wow.
Nice week, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
And 2 days later, I had to get on an airplane and fly to South Africa for a couple of days, you know, but I missed the rehearsals, but I told somebody that I'd do it. So I went ahead and did it. You know, the old show must go on. I didn't really feel like traveling, but I was traveling with Brenda Russell and Denise Williams, both of whom are really good friends of mine. So they said, here's a shoulder, you need it. Here I am. You know,
Brenda Russell, Piano in the Dark, one of my favorite tracks ever.
She's you look at Brenda, or you listen to Brenda, and you go, that is an artist. She has got art written all over. She's amazing. Plus, she's a great visual artist too. She picks up a pencil and draws a pencil drawing. You know who it is. she's a wonderful friend. I've known her for years. She's just great.
So the album's coming out on the 22nd. Yeah. Of course, everything's still, you know, in total lockdown. This is the point where, you know, I usually ask the artist, what's in the, you know, any more videos? How are you coping with the fact that generally you would put out an album and at least do some type of tour, but you're not able to?
Well, generally, you know, the word generally kind of doesn't, it just doesn't equate to how this whole thing's coming down. With what's going on with the COVID and everything. I mean, my son was just who lives in my guest house over here. He's got a Ableton rig on one side of the room, and I got a Pro Tools rig on the other side of the room. He just tested positive 2-3 days ago.
Really?
And we're waiting for the because Tamara and I immediately went to get tested. And my temperature is below. You know, I mean, no temperature, no coughing, or anything. So I don't think there's anything going on. But you know, somebody who said Elon Musk had 4 tests in one day, 2 of them negative, 2 of them positive. So I don't know what that says about the tests. It could be good, or it could be good news or bad news, and it might actually be not either. You know, I mean,
yeah, it's so hard nowadays, definitely.
Yeah, but you know, I'm still writing. I mean, I got in the mode of writing when I was doing the album, so I'm trying to start to put together some stuff for Tamara, because she's one of the main writers on the record. And one of the main singers. She sings all the backgrounds up, you know, all the upstairs soprano stuff. Yeah. And she sings like a bird. She's like an angry big bird. I mean, it's just not we're not talking canaries. We're talking hawks. You know, she's got a really powerful voice and kind of understands how I phrase. So I get her, you know, because I phrase things a certain way and lay things in a certain way. She knows where I'm putting it as well as anybody does. So when I got those real high notes that I just flat out can't make without pliers, if you know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, I hear you. So I said, Tam, could you come and help me out and sing these high notes for me? So she's all over the record, and she ends up, as a writer, she's as good as it gets. She really comes up with great premises,
Mm,
Sometimes really great melodies. I mean, she's a really melodic as can be,
yeah.
and and has little hooky things that she comes up with that I kind of don't sometimes. So it's a great situation. And like, how far do you have to do to how far do you have to drive the car to write with write with a great writer who lives with you?
Yeah.
And we've been married for 39 years, I think.
So you know each other.
Yeah, we kind of know each other. We at least for sure know each other's music. That's
Yeah.
for damn sure.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. Um, Now I got to talk to you about some of the stuff that I've dug. I dug up a few things here, and it's got to be all true because I read about it on the internet. So this has got to be.
Wikipedia never gets it wrong.
The first thing I got to ask you, I'll try and keep the story minimal and everything, but of course, everybody knows you were in Chicago.
Yeah.
When I live in Vermont now. I'd moved to Connecticut for about a year. I got my ass kicked down there and ended up coming back home, but it's all good. Fall of winter of '88, I'm down there more or less by myself. I had a few friends, a couple relatives. There was a girl up here I was kind of pining for who had fallen in love. And you guys put out this friggin' song called Look Away that was on the radio about every 5 minutes. And my heart was just getting ripped out.
That's a Diane Warren song. She writes some of the most passionate songs I've ever heard.
I mean, when you were recording that, did you know? I mean, obviously her pedigree is for hits anyway, but did you expect it to blow up the way it did?
Well, you got to look back. This was really might have been the first or second sort of power ballad that she did. So I mean, that's when it really caught flame. I mean, since then, I mean, she did one for Roxette. She did one for John Waite sang. I can't remember what the band was. Serious.
Oh yeah, the Babies. Not the Babies. Bad English.
Well, yeah, it was Bad English. It was they had a Diane hit, and she just keeps slamming. She's written the new Ringo Starr thing, which's got everybody in the world on it. It looks like the union musicians union thing, or all the stars are on that thing. And once again, she just nailed it down. She's a great writer. So, and Ron Nevison was the producer. And when we met the first time, everybody says, "Well, can we get this up in the tenor range?" So because we have to do tenor, and Ron said, "No, I'm using that guy." And I think it turned out that was one of the better moves Ron made. I mean, he kind of it was one of the harder vocals I've ever done because he kind of wanted me to sing a little differently than I naturally do. And it came off. It worked out. It ended up working out great. The record did really well. I mean, what do you want? And I know there wasn't any horns on it that I know of. So I know that some of the guys in the band really hated it because there were no horns. And it was the second single that they put out. The first one was "I Don't Want to Live Without Your Love," which was another Diane song that's just ridiculous.
Yeah. Right.
And I sang that one too. And I sang 3 songs on that album, and every one of them got up to if not number 1, I think it was a number 1, a number 3, and a number 8.
Yeah.
Sounds like an order at a Mexican restaurant.
Yeah.
I mean, like a number 1 with guacamole and
every time I hear that tune, it just takes me back to those days, and it takes me back to the pain and the emotion, and the lonesomeness. But it also sort of shows me how I've matured beyond everything now too. It's just a timeless feel. Just a great...
So do you still hang out with that girl in Vermont?
No, she has moved on. She's gotten married. I'm very good friends with her and her husband, and everything worked. I met a beautiful, beautiful girl. We got married. We have 4 fantastic children, and everything worked the way it should.
Man, there's Brian Reagan did one thing. He says, "We got 2 wonderful kids and another one." He's a funny stand-up comic, man. He's just really he does voice shit. "We've got 2 wonderful kids and another one." Great.
One group that I looked at that at first I was kind of like, man, how the hell did he hook up with these guys? But you did so many different things. But then I read that you were friends with a couple of songwriters who did a lot of stuff. REO Speedwagon, you're on the 9 Lives album.
Yeah.
But you worked a lot with Tom Kelly and Richard Page, who of course went on and did a lot of stuff with them, correct?
Not so much with REO, but we did a lot of sessions.
Okay.
We did a lot of background vocal dates. I think we actually did a Barry Manilow record, which was actually pretty cool. I didn't quite know what to expect.
Yeah.
And I got in there and I realized this guy knows what he wants, and he knows voicing as good as anybody. I mean, you do a
Yeah.
key change and have everybody voice cross. The point was like, hey, this guy's a musical piece of work.
Mm.
I loved it. I had a ball, and I always loved working with Tom Kelly. Now Tom wrote those big hits for REO.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was a writer on that stuff. So, and Tom was one of those singers. He and I worked a whole lot of dates together, just vocal dates,
Right.
and he's the guy that can hear anything and give it back to you
Mm.
with his voice. I mean, even a beep from a metal detector in the airport, he can make that sound.
Wow.
And make people wonder what's going on. He's the greatest guy to have, especially if you want one harmony over the lead singer on the pre-chorus.
Yeah.
He's the guy because he can wire up exactly where the lead singer was putting it and just nail it. It sounds like same voice. He's really, really a great friend and big golfer now.
Yeah.
I asked his manager, how's Tom doing? He says, well, he had a golf course surgically implanted to the bottom of his feet. And then he said, which is too bad because he's a shitty golfer. It was John Barrick. I was just, all right, John, I can't wait to tell Tom you said that. He said, oh, believe me, I said it to him too,
Too funny. Do you remember anything about that session with REO? I mean, were you in with the band at all? Do you remember anything about the guys?
I'm a good friend of Kevin.
Okay.
And Kevin's a good guy. Him and me, David Crosby and Richard Marx did a tune that Kevin had written right around the time of Desert Storm.
Mm.
And I can't remember what the name of the song, but the four of us sang it. And Cronin's, he doesn't have my favorite vocal style, but that guy hits the stage and slams it for 2.5 hours and just doesn't miss a note, never out of tune. He's a monster. I mean, he's a big time monster. I love his singing.
They were my first big real rock concert was Survivor and REO Speedwagon.
Wow, that's a handful. Was it the originals? Was Jimmy singing with Survivor or was it Dave Bickler?
Actually, the first time it was with Bickler. And then I saw Survivor and REO Speedwagon twice, different tours. The first time was with Bickler. The second time was with Jimmy Jameson.
Yeah, Jimmy could sing Time, News, and Weather and pull it off. And Dave's a good singer too. I mean, I did a orchestral show with Dave in Dubai, maybe 3.5 years ago, with a 54-piece orchestra from Moscow.
Wow.
And about an 8-piece rock band and 6 singers. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely.
On the top of a mountain out in the desert outside of Dubai. It was the craziest gig I've ever done. And Dave got out there and tore it up. I did real well. Bobby Kimball was on the date.
Oh, nice.
And the three of us were just smoking. We had a ball.
Now, speaking of Survivor, did you ever have much interaction with Jim Peterick?
I've worked with Jim off and on here and there. He's a sweetie pie. He's a powerful songwriter. I've always loved his songwriting. He's just one of those guys. It's just always. I mean, I didn't quite once again and know what to think. The purple hair and the whole. I mean, he kind of understood somewhere along the line that persona is the name of the game.
Yeah.
And he's there, but he's a great dad. He's a great husband. He's a great musician. He's just he's very, very similar to what I do. He's just in it and on it,
Well, that's what I was going to get to. When I talked to him, he talked about how he could write songs for different people, be it 38 Special, be it for Bickler, be it for Jimmy Jameson, be it for anybody that he's written with, Ides of March. Yeah. And you're sort of in that same wheelhouse. You write for the artists.
Well, with like we had Earth, Wind, and Fire had a big hit with a song that David Foster and Jay Graydon and I wrote called After the Love Is Gone.
Right.
We kind of wrote that for me. And then Maurice White heard it and went, if Bill will agree to not put it on his record, I'll put it on mine on the next EWF album. I said, yes, great move.
Yeah, it was he only went on to win a Grammy with it,
Yeah, I hear you. And then a couple of years later, Jay Graydon and Steve Lukather called me and said, "You want to do these lyrics on this song we're doing for George Benson?"
Mm.
So that was one that was an assignment. I had to kind of write it for what I thought George could, George could pull off. Now they had a lot of the melodies other than the bridge. I wrote the melodies for the bridge, but I had to come up with the lyrics for it. And then when George put out the song, Jay called me and I did the background vocals for it.
Mm.
And that was "Turn Your Love Around," which was really kind of a big hit for George.
Yeah, and another Grammy winner, yawn.
Yeah. Yeah, I figured, man, I got one 2 years ago. I got one today. 2 more years, I'll get another one. I was wrong.
Now I've got to ask you. I have zero musical talent other than listening to music and talking to artists. As far as writing songs, playing instruments, I can't do any of that. And I've always been envious of people who can play, but even more songwriters. Was this something you were considered just sort of born with? Were you always a good English student in school?
Well, that for sure. When I was in 8th grade, I learned how to diagram sentences, and I actually one time just on a whim, I diagrammed the Declaration of Independence.
Wow.
That took a while.
Yeah.
It's a pronoun, that's a noun, that's a adjective, that's an adverb. It's like people don't quite know what I say when Hollywood is not a preposition; it's an adjective. It's a descriptive word. Anyway, I mean, I think I wrote my first blues when I was, I don't know, 16, 17.
Yeah.
And I've kind of been off and on doing it for a long time. I'm just looking to find, like with the Sun's first record, I kind of had to write what was working. If we were doing, like, for instance, a Bobby Bland tune, I would write an original tune, but kind of at the same tempo.
Yeah.
And with a little bit of the same feel, because we knew by playing the Bland tune that people were digging it. Now let's get one that's us. So that's kind of where a lot of the very first of the Suns material started to come from. And then after a while, I just went, sit down at the piano and come up with something. And I go, wow, that's really cool. That would be good to sing over. And the next thing you know, I'll get a lyric or something. Most of the time, the way I write is the music will get written first.
Okay.
And then I'll try to write words over it. Occasionally, I get one where the words are first. Tom Kelly told me, he says a lot of the stuff that him and Billy Steinberg wrote, the big hits and stuff, started with the words.
Huh.
Billy would come up with some of the lyric ideas, and Tom would sync it to music, and which is, obviously he did quite well. Yeah. I mean, True Colors strike a familiar note to anybody?
Yeah. Wow.
Think there were any checks from Kodak around that period of time?
Yeah.
Definitely. Tell me about it. Yeah.
The other thing I've got to ask you about, I read you were there. I don't know if you were there when he was singing, but a part of it when Clapton was recording Tears in Heaven.
He recorded a version of it for the movie Rush.
Right.
And then the record that really took off was a live,
the
unplugged thing on MTV. But I walked in and actually, they were just working on it. And then they put that tape down and came up with a tune that is at the end of the movie.
Right.
And Eric and I went and did the backgrounds on it.
Really?
He was on his mic that he had set up already. And they put up another mic for me. Wow. And at one point I was going, Eric, we're going too fast. We'll never make any money. I was just jiving him, right? Yeah. He says, yeah, you're right. Wait a minute. It's my money. But, wow. At one point I just had to say, hey, aside from all of this craziness and all this stuff, you say more with 3 notes than most people say with 5 albums. You know what I mean? Yeah. He was just a magic guitar player. And I said, how many people have come up to you and sung your solo from off of the one, I think Sensation was the name of the song, off of the Blues Breakers album? He says, just about everybody. That's a big thing,
Yeah. Has there ever been anybody that you've worked with or maybe been asked to work with that going into it, you thought, man, this is so far out of my realm. I don't know, but then it worked.
Well, I did one day. When I first came to town, I came to LA, moved from Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. Yeah. And I moved to LA, and I already knew David Foster, already knew Jay Graydon. And I was going to start an album, and I talked to management company, which was Irving Azov and Howard Kaufman. I talked
Mm.
them into letting me use this young piano player as a producer. They said, he'll never be anything more than a session player. You're talking about David Foster here, and I had been working with him as a vocal guy for some of his earlier production, J.P. Morgan and some other things like that. And I talked him into using David, but we couldn't really do it for about 3 or 4 months because everybody's schedule wasn't coming together.
Yeah.
And so David Foster and Jay Graydon were both friends of mine, and they were both doing a lot of tracking dates for a lot of producers. And they just said to most of the producers, when you get around time to do background vocals, call this guy. So they kind of got me my first vocal dates around town. The work that I did on those got me my second and third. And, I mean,
Sure.
it sort of became, kind of came to the ball game and made it work, So, but I really kind of owe my background session thing to, because I just needed to make the rent while I was waiting to do an album. And then, then when everybody's schedule opened up, we went in and did the single album, which I think half the record was radio, which is the guys in radio, guitar player. Come on, Bill. Anyway, a funk band pretty much, and then Toto played the more Whiteside stuff, really more difficult stuff. Yeah. David Page and Steve Lukather and David Hungate.
Yeah.
And then I ended up using Bobby Kimball on some of the vocals. One of the tunes on there we used Bobby Kimball and Michael McDonald.
Nice. You mentioned some incredible names. I knew some of these coming into this interview, and you've mentioned some others. Have you ever met anybody that just left you totally starstruck? Lou
Rawls.
Really?
I absolutely. When I was a kid in high school, I think it was Tobacco Road was on the radio, and I went and bought a couple of albums. I bought Black and Blue and Tobacco Road. They were my textbook of how to phrase.
Oh, okay.
And then when I met him at one point, the Sons had a manager, B&B, Bernard Neufeld and Bash, and Lou was on with the same management. And I met him, and I was like a little kid, I was just like, oh my God, it's Lou. We ended up becoming really pretty good friends. We were hanging for a while. And then what an amazing singer. I mean, when D'Angelo first came out, everybody said, wow, dig how cool that back phrasing is. And I said, well, Lou was doing that 40 years ago, And I said, hey, Lou, how do you get that back phrasing? He said, well, usually it's because I forgot the words until the last second. Jive. Now you're JIV positive, So we had a ball when, I mean, he was a kick. I actually we did the Sons did a gig at the Shrine Auditorium in LA, and Yardbirds were the opener. B.B. King was the second liner, and we opened the show. And BB was going to use our Hammond organ with his organ player and they had a set of pedals they were going to put in, and his organ player played great pedals. Duke Jethro, great organist. And our organ blew a fuse right at the end of our first set. Oh, no. So suddenly the promoter comes up. We sent somebody out for a fuse, but BB had to go on. And promoter comes up and says, BB needs a bass player. So my bass player went over he was kind of a jazz guy. He went over to get his bass, and I went over and said, Al, do you name me one B.B. King song? Do you know who he is? He said, no, on both counts. I said, give me that. And I went down and played a set with B.B. King. Wow. And that, to me, that's one of the big moments of my life. What a sweet man he was. Really a great guy. And such a groove. I mean, such a great guitarist and even better singer for my money. But I was playing bass. It wasn't my regular instrument, but I knew how to play it. Sure. And the drummer, Sonny Freeman, just had such a great shuffle that I had my first real major shuffle lesson that night in front of a whole audience of people. And that I always look at that as one of the big moments of my life.
Wow. The other show I read about that you saw that I wanted to ask you about, you saw James Brown on New Year's Day of '63 on an afternoon show in Oakland.
Yeah, it was, and they weren't as tight as usual. Actually, James went up and played drums on a couple of things.
Really?
He was a good drummer, and relatively good organ player, piano player. A little sloppy, but he got away with it. They actually put an instrumental album out called Grits and Soul, which was him playing organ and piano. And it wasn't bad. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
I've heard better piano players, but you know, what the heck. But I mean, it changed my life, just the band, just the way that band segues from one song to the next. It's like watching a flock of birds, just everybody turns at one time.
Yeah.
Like somebody said, 1, 2, 3, go, except there's nobody saying 1, 2, 3, go. They just do it. And
Wow.
that's the way that band, I mean, the grooves on the songs were great, but then when they change tempos and go to another song, it's just like, boom, it's off and running. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, that was, you know, it really gave me a real insight into, you know, hey, if you start rehearsing this kind of stuff, you
Yeah.
know, yeah, get it to where everybody's reading each other's minds. It's really a cool thing.
Gotta ask you about music, you know, whether we want to call it the music general, music and music business or music in general. You know, when you started, it was, you know, recording on tape and studios and
Hey,
albums and
I did my first album on Smoke Signal.
okay, yeah. I know I don't want to make you feel old, you know,
No,
but
I'm just jiving you. I'm giving you.
but it was you know, it was like tape, recording on tape, you know, releasing on vinyl. You're relying on AM radio for that much. You know,
Yeah.
nowadays we talked, everything's digital. There's not even FM radio really anymore. It's internet. What's some of like the best and the worst from then and now? You know?
Well, I think when you look back at recording on tape, you're looking at analog.
Yeah.
And tape, you know, 24 track tape or 16 track or even 8 track, 4 track for that matter. There's a certain level of kind of natural compression that affects mostly the Fender bass or the keyboard bass and the bass drum. And that feel, there's something like that. It took forever for digital to try to figure a way to make that happen in ones and zeros. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's one thing I dig about this album is Alan Hertz, who's the drummer on half the record, and the mixer for the record. He mixed the record. He's a great Pro Tools engineer. He has gear that makes it sound more analog. And then when we finished the mixes, we took it to Joe Gassworth, who is legendary. I mean, he's remastered some Hendrix stuff, and Joe's really good.
Yeah.
Did almost all the Grateful Dead records. And Joe says, hey, I'm gonna take this record, I'm gonna fly it to tape, and I'm gonna master it coming off tape. And what it did is just it kept the warmth.
Yeah.
He put the warmth back in it. So I really love working with tape, but at some point in the game, I kind of had to go digital, and now I'm just, you know, Pro Tools, and it's a thing. But when I mix it, I mean, not only do I put real drummers on it instead of machines, but I try to get, you know, Alan's he's one of the best mixers as far as I'm concerned, because he's so musical. And that's really kind of, and the guys that are trying their best to make it sound like analog are the guys I like to work with.
Yeah. Great sound. Great sound.
It's just fatter. It's just fatter and bigger sounding.
Yeah. I don't know if you can hear him or not. It's just my dogs. I think my wife's home. I told them I'm still interviewing, but they like to get in on the
Oh yeah. Hey, I'm surprised that mine aren't. I think they might be at the groomers. I've got 2 Papillons, one of which is probably more verbal than me and Tamara put together.
I wanted to touch on one thing too. Now that you brought her back up, Tamara, of course, your wife, your son Will is a fantastic musician as well.
Oh yeah, no.
And you had a very musical family, other than your father, who was like a lawyer / judge type.
Yeah.
Did he come in handy when it came like contract times?
No.
No.
He really was. I mean, he was a lawyer. He never did music law on any level. And it's quite different than normal, you know, than anything else, you know.
As any musician will tell you.
Yeah, absolutely. But my mom was a major musician when she was a kid. Very talented woman. I mean, she used to put me in a playpen and put me under the piano and play for 2 or 3 hours.
Wow. When
I was 2, and then I had my first piano lessons. I was 4, I think, and then we kind of gave it up when my parents got divorced and we moved out, and I didn't really touch a piano again until 4 or 5 years later. I decided that I really didn't want to be a musician. I would prefer to be either a fireman or a cowboy. Typical kid, you know.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then somewhere along the line, it started jumping back at me. It's like, hey, what's going on? Especially when I heard Elvis, I went, I will learn the guitar. So I
Now,
learned the
who's
guitar.
his guitar? Was it James Burton, his guitarist?
Yeah, James played with him later on. I think Chet Atkins played on a few of the earlier
Right.
records, the
Who
Sun
was
records.
who was the other guy, the one who did the solo like on Hound Dog? I can't. His name totally escapes me.
I don't know.
I can't
It's
think either.
too far back, you know.
Yeah, great
But
stuff.
I used to kind of at some point when after I really got in the business, I sort of poo-pooed Elvis's singing, and I listen to it now. I go, that guy was a monster. He was a good singer, a
Yeah,
really good singer, you know.
yeah.
And so about Joe Williams had a great thing. He said, "All Elvis Presley songs stop and start again."
The false ending, yes, indeed. Oh,
Some great stuff.
t-
Joe's a nut. I mean, sing with Toto.
yeah.
And I've had a band with him for a couple of years, CWF, which is Champlin, Williams, and Freestead.
Okay.
And Freested's a guitar player, producer from Sweden. So we've hands across the pond, as it were. You know.
Yes, yes. Chatting with Bill Champlin here. His new album, Living for Love, coming out on Imagine Records January 22nd. You can check out the first single, Reason to Believe. It came out January 1st. Check it out on YouTube and all your other places. Now, to get the album, the physicals, they go to, tell us where to go, Bill.
It's billchamplin.com/shop. But just go to billchamplin.com and it'll lead you to where the stuff is. And we've got Sons. We still sell Sons, Sons stuff at that little, our own little website shop. And it's all just a mail order thing. The album cover is unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's, and like, so somebody was telling me the other day, Alice Cooper said, I don't like to buy air.
Yeah, exactly. Put it in my hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bill, I like to end with some silly questions. I'm hoping these are questions maybe you've never even been asked. Sound good?
Oh, cool. I'm in. Silly is my life. I mean, I'm a Mel Brooks fan from the word go. You want to see silly, try some of that.
There you go.
Yeah.
First car you bought with your own money.
Let me see. I think it was I was in the Suns. I bought a used car from the state of California that at one time was used by the poultry inspector. Wow. So my car went from carrying chicken shit to carrying me. It was like $400-$500. It was there was a Merc of some kind. Oh, a Mercury Comet, 64 Mercury Comet.
Wow.
Actually a pretty nice car, although I don't think I ever had the speedometer working, but
Who needs one of those?
Who needs that? You know what I mean?
Is there a clothing style from the past that you would love to see come back into fashion?
Not particularly. I know most people say don't throw away your bell bottoms because it's coming back around, and certain of it, since from the 60s, it has come around 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
And I don't at this point in the game, I don't really care. I mean, a nice Armani suit would be great, but I mean, for the most part, I'm still just a jeans and kind of a jeans guy. I don't really worry about it too much.
Given your choice of household chores, would you rather do dishes or the laundry?
Dishes, and that's exactly what my real job is. When Tamara and I were living together, right before we ever got married, I said, we go to a lot of restaurants. Is there any chance of maybe eating at home? I got a certain amount of cooking gear here. And she said, yeah, she said, I just don't like to clean up after it. And I said, oh, that's okay. I'll do it. And I meant that night.
You volunteered for the rest of your life.
For the rest of my life. And I kind of am the dishes guy now at my house. And, you got to do something,
Sure.
You can't just be, I'm the musician guy. I mean, Jim Pankow said something to me one time. He says, yeah, it's great. You go out on the road, people are screaming at you, jumping up and down, standing up, lighting Bic lighters in the air. You go home and it's like, hey, rock star, take out the trash.
Yeah.
So I
brought back to earth quickly.
Yeah, come on back to earth. A little bit of humility never hurt anybody at some point.
Absolutely. If you can go back in time and eat one of your mom's home cooked meals from your childhood, what would you have her fix?
Either turkey dinner or spare ribs.
Okay.
That's about all she could do. But she was kind of cool sometimes. She'd say she'd talk us into like, all right, we're gonna have breakfast for dinner, and we just thought that was the coolest thing. And she was just being lazy. She said, eggs, bacon, and toast.
Yeah, we that's our go-to every once in a while. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes it's like I've asked Tamara one time said, "Well, let's just have breakfast." She just looked at me. She says, "You kinky devil, you." Some funny shit.
Now, you mentioned being a Mel Brooks fan. Do you have a favorite quote from a Mel Brooks movie?
Just lately there was one where that in Spaceballs where they're saying the uh, the emperor is saying to the guy, to I guess it was Rick Moranis, says, "Comb the desert, comb the desert," and they got three guys out there with combs, right? And they're combing the desert, and the one guy says to the Rick Moranis, says, "Are we taking this too literally?" He says, "No, he said to comb the desert." So he says to the first two guys, running this big ace comb across the desert, "See anything?" He said, "No, sir." The next one is a little smaller one. He said, "You see anything?" "No, sir." And then get to a guy, two black guys, and they got a pick, a small pick. And they said, "Do you see anything?" And the guy said, "We ain't found shit." And Tamara said the other day she was I think, I don't know where she was, but maybe at Costco or something, and she said saw a guy that was wearing a Spaceballs the mask.
Oh, wow.
And apparently there's another mask that says, "We ain't seen shit."
Oh,
I don't like to wear T-shirts or masks or anything that have dirty words on it. Just it can piss people off, and
oh yeah.
rather not. But boy, I want to get one just to have it. But I mean, Blazing Saddles, forget about it.
Oh yeah, there's a million and one.
Mongo, Santa Maria.
Favorite old school wrestler?
Oh God, I don't know. Gorgeous George.
Gorgeous George. Okay, yeah, great answer. Great answer. That's old school.
That's really old school. That goes to show you what somebody said. How long? Somebody, I don't know. Somebody said, "How old are you?" I said, "Man, I'm so old I fart dust."
All right, last one, and this is the one we have the most fun with. If they were to make a movie of your life, what actor would you have portray you in the movie? And it's your movie, your life. You can pick anybody.
Well, it probably years ago would have been Peter O'Toole, because I've been told all my life that I look like him.
Yeah, I could get that.
I don't imagine a lot of people went to Peter O'Toole. You look like Bill Champlin. I don't think so. And if they did, he was probably busy having his third drink and nobody knows about it. He was an imbiber. Let's put it that way. But what a funny man. He's just out of whack. So I'd say Peter O'Toole. I don't know, Kurt Russell. Something. If it was a matter of trying to find somebody who looked like me, I mean, those kind of guys are sort of down that alley.
Yeah, very cool.
And,
just to get us sort of back into the music realm to finish things up with, if a young person came up to you, I said, "Mr. Champlin, I've started writing some songs and stuff, and I'd really like your advice on things." What advice would you give them, to help them on their way?
Put together two kind of demos. One, a piano vocal. No other stuff. Have that in your hands, and then put together as produced a demo as you possibly can. Get a few of those together, and then start knocking on publishers' doors. Because the publisher has a way. I mean, a friend of mine, a co-writer of mine, and a dear friend of mine, Dennis McCoskey, has been living in Nashville for a long time, and he's just started publishing. He started a publishing company and signed a bunch of young writers. One of them is a guy named Hardy, who's also an artist. And Dennis has now kind of become a pretty major publisher in Nashville. There's a lot of other publishers there, and I think that might be the best way to try to get it across to people. But even getting what do you call it? Even getting covers on somebody else's record.
Yeah.
It didn't make the money it used to. What you want to do is you want to get a license for a movie. And what's cool is if you got it, you don't necessarily have to have an artist record deal to get songs in movies.
Yeah.
Although most of the people that are well known, that are in the top 10, usually have the first shot.
Yeah.
But sometimes you write a tune that's right. Or a TV theme. TV theme's the same kind of thing. I did a vocal on a TV theme years ago, and everybody in town auditioned for this. It was In the Heat of the Night, the Carol O'Connor thing. Yeah. When I went, I was off the road for about a week, and Chris Page, who's the guy that kind of put together that particular piece of music, he said, "You want to take a shot at it?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll take a shot at it." And I did, and I got the gig. And that thing's been playing in people's. The song is, I think, Marilyn Bergman and Quincy Jones wrote the tune.
Yeah.
for the Ray Charles movie, which was in 1963, maybe. I remember when they said, "Do you know the song In the Heat of the Night?" I said, "Yeah, I do." So, well, they're making this TV show, so give it a shot. And everybody in town took a shot at it, but the main musician, uh, uh, soundtrack musician, Dirk De Benedictis is his name. He
Mm.
just liked the sound of my pipes, and he just went for it. So that's been kind of the gift that keeps on giving. Although it's at this point of the game, it gives you about a 16th of a cent every time it plays. It's down pretty low at this point of the
Yeah.
game, but it was a nice little thing for a good little while.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, if you could take a song off of Living for Love off of the album and get it placed in a television show, what television show would you want one of these tunes placed in off this
Oh man,
album?
that's hard to say. As I don't watch a lot of TV
Oh, you don't?
anymore.
Okay.
Not too much. I might watch movie stuff, movie channels, and that kind of thing. But I mean, any of these, probably any of these. Mostly sitcoms would be what I would do, and I'm not really sure if there's one on the record that would be right for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's a few things over the years that I've done that have kind of a if not funny, at least a certain snide approach. But I can't think of one.
Yeah.
Maybe Living for Love itself, the song itself.
Yeah.
It's really kind of bluesy. It's a little
Yes.
bluesier than the rest of the record. I remember when Alan Hertz heard it the first time, he said, "Man, this sounds like a Bonnie Raitt song."
Mm.
I said, "Well, thank you."
And I'm glad you brought that song up and said it was bluesy, because that right, I'm looking at my sheet and I didn't ask you about it, but Living for Love, my note was bluesy.
Yeah, it is. It's just kind of a blues. It's weird because I started off sort of wanting to become a blues singer, and I really did nothing but sing a lot of blues. I was way into Jimmy Reed, and I was way into all the guys that were doing blues when I was a kid. Little Milton, different people like that. Awesome singers, way cool songs, and it was just something about it that really attracted me a lot to the blues. And then as I went along, I kind of became a little more adept in the three chords.
Yeah.
Musically, I started to go places and start to do things. And then at some point in the game, I got this call to do In the Heat of the Night. And I just realized that, man, I started off as a blues singer, and this is basically the only blues I've ever recorded.
Mm.
So at some point in the game, I think the bluesy sort of swampy feel on Living for Love. That's the first song that, I was writing it, and Tamara came in the room. She said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I've got this thing. What do you think of this?" And I played what I had for her, and she said, "You got to start doing a solo album. This is enough. You're working for everybody else. Lord knows with the lockdowns, you got plenty of time.
Sure.
We just done an album with Gary Falcone, Tamara, and me called Wonderground, WUNDER ground, right?
Okay.
And that was kind of a little more of a rock thing, and I was spent a good time as a producer making sure that it was cool for Tamara for Tamara singing and Gary singing, and I didn't really spend a whole lot of time on mine, just knocked off some vocals because I was really kind of paying more attention to like learning how to produce. And that was sort of that was the record that I kind of did that with. Right. And then we were kind of going to do another one, but that band wasn't really catching air. We weren't really kicking, I mean, we had a live band, we played some club dates and everything, but people I don't think got it particularly. Yeah. And I kind of went, and Tamara did the same right around the same time. She says, put some of this stuff away for now. You should go after a solo album. So I did. And I got thinking, there's a song on there called Another Lie that's really pretty deep song. It's really about my relationship with my older son the last 2 years of his life.
Oh, okay.
When he was fighting cancer, and it was, we really became pretty good friends, and kaboom, gone. So it took a long time to get that song written after he died. It was that was like pulling teeth with a screwdriver.
Yeah.
I finally got it out. I went after it. It was hard to sing. It was hard to do, but it's on the record. I just went. I gotta be a little bit more of an artist on this record than the last one I did. I mean, the last one I did, I was being a producer, and this one I was like being an artist and a producer.
It's a fantastic album, Bill. Once again, called "Living for Love," coming out January 22nd on Imagine Records. We've been chatting with Bill Champlin here for Let's Discuss with Lance Hall. It's been a thrill, Bill, to talk to you tonight.
Lance, thanks for having me. Don't forget, everybody, January 22nd. Imagine Records is going to release, and if you want a CD, it's BillChamplin.com.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Bill.
Great, Lance. Love you, boss. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Be good.